Hey kids, howdy howdy howdy. It's a Malakilla here with one more YouTube video that may never get posted. Who knows? I've got like 50 of these damn things that car repair shit that one of these days I got to get around to going through and checking. Anyway, today we got ourselves an 07 Yukon. As we can see, the accoutrements that have been added to this vehicle, but whatever, not the reason. Detroit boy wheel or something, like maybe that's valuable, I don't know. Alright, what we're doing today is ball joints. I have a small ball joint press kit, so I use those. Really not that tough. There's a couple tricks to getting it out. Number one, first off, step one, loosen all three of your shock mounts bolts. You do not need it completely loose or down. You just need them loose all the way towards the top of their threads. You can see it's all the way up to there. You just want this thing to move around. Next part of this, right here is a 21 millimeter nut, which I don't know why there's a second nut on that. Oops, that must have been on my socket when I was putting it in. Anyway, there's a 21 millimeter nut. Torch really helps to crack those loose. My move on this is, as you can see, there is a mark right here. I put right about where the plane of this curvature and the house or the yoke that it goes into meet. I take a punch and a chisel, or punch or chisel, whatever, with a big old hammer, and mark it. Inside should be about the same anyway. There really won't be any change there because the bolts has a flat along the one edge of the bolt, and it should all clock and rotate at the same thing. Anyway, same procedure over here. 21 millimeter. This one was a bitch. One of the bolts actually snapped right off. I tried to take the nut off on the outside and the bolt broke. I had to run to the dealership. Bolt was about $5 and change. The nut was also about $5. Came to $10.50 for the pair of them at the dealership. So if you break one, just know that. However, it was a Chevy dealership. They only had one on the shelf. So thank God only one broke for me. This is just cheap AutoZone Duralast whatever things. It's what he wanted, so it's what he gets. So that's the top part here. This 19 millimeter nut, although I did it with a ratcheting 3/4. Took that out without any problem. The bottom of your shock will need to come loose. There are two vertical bolts. They're kind of long, 15 millimeter heads. Zip those out, and the shock you need to move around. The reason why you need it to move around is so that this bolt, when it goes inwards, it hits the spring. So you need the clearance to get it to slide all the way out and that dang spring. You don't need the shock spring assembly completely out. You could take it out if you wanted. It ain't gonna hurt nothing, but it might probably make it easier. I just didn't. I'm fucking lazy, and I'm so lazy I create extra work for myself. Next part of this, right here, this I believe was just a regular 21 millimeter nut. As we can see, his stabilizer bar link is broken. Well, I'm going to replace that too as well. I just have to go around to the store and buy one. Lower ball joint. After you take off your brake caliper, I would suggest you take off the caliper bracket. I shoved the brake caliper up into this pocket right here, and it's not going to fall. It's not going anywhere. You're also going to want to unplug your ABS line. That will come down. There's a fastener right here, 10 millimeter bolt head. There's also going to be another one, I believe. I think this time I only had one. Maybe I had two. But either way, no, there should be two. There should be two of them. The other one I think either goes into the top. Yeah, it goes into the top of the steering knuckle here. 10 millimeter as well. Unplug it, disconnect there, and you should be good. To get this out, this one took a little bit of trickery. Obviously you got to get the big nut off of your CV axle. This one I believe, I don't remember, I'm not sure, I think it was a 35 millimeter or something like that. I had that. I also had 3/4 drive, whatever. 1 3/8 is what I used, but I believe it's actually 34, 35 millimeter. So which is the correct size. Either one will work. Once you start dealing with larger size nuts and bolts, there's a little bit more thing. On this, I've already pressed in the new one. Now these are directional for some reason. Stamped on the boot, it said this end inward, so it's on the inside. The way I did it to know which way was right, I marked the actual ball joint on this side so that I could see that I knew if I was putting it in with my ball joint pressed correctly. Now, to press that old thing out, what I needed to do all the way around this thing is basically it's pressed in place and then punched down, stamped. Can't really see it very well, but on 4 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, 4 little. The machine kind of presses it and kind of mushrooms it out on those 4 spots. Just go boom. So what I do is hammer, chisel, hammer, chisel, hammer, chisel. Get it as best on the back side as you can, and it's really hard to get a good swing on it because lack of space to swing it. And once that was done, I wailed it on it a few times just to kind of try and break it free. PB Blaster might work, or some other penetrating oil. I've never had any luck with it. Anything that's pressed in place, the metal is kind of mashed together to such a level that you're never going to get it apart that way. Or at least not with PB Blaster. People way overvalue that shit. Torch would also have worked great. Unfortunately, I'm all out of oxygen, so no torch was available for me on this process. At that point in time, put a big old cup of some sort. This was my combination. I used, let's see here, on the bottom side, I did like this, and actually it had to ride crooked on here. I couldn't get it to sit there because the edge of this, I didn't have the right size cup. As you can see, it kind of divoted up the aluminum. Won't really affect anything, but this is how I had to do it, and then it kind of went crooked on me, something like that, when I was pressing it down, but it pressed out just fine. This is where Milwaukee Tool Review, this is their brushless, but I think you can get these on eBay around 225 bucks. In the catalog they're around 400 and something. Definitely worth the purchase. Right now I got one of my dinky batteries on it, but the bigger batteries also do make a huge difference. And then all you got to do is pull a freaking trigger and it drills it right out. I put a bunch of tension on the ball joint press and then whacked everything with a hammer a bunch of times just to kind of get it to free up with a bunch of pressure on it, and then drove it right out and it popped right out. Press the new one in. New ones will come with a little snap ring. You need an external snap ring pliers. You could probably do it with needle nose pliers if you had to, but surprisingly this is one of the few tools from AutoZone that I bought probably 10 years ago, and these things still actually work, although the little tips on them kind of suck. Helpful tools, I use air chisel as a punch to, whenever I do a CV shaft, I always put it into the divot and break it free from the wheel bearing hub. You're also going to want a pickle fork to pop. Top one pops easy, the bottom one wasn't too bad. Basically I pounded it all in there, and then I just kind of wailed right here a few times to kind of shock wave it, and eventually it popped right out. So let's see here, the bottom nut, I'm not too sure the size it's supposed to be. It's probably like a 25 millimeter or something. I used a 15/16, so, and 12 point and chrome with an impact, because you know I like my fucking tools. I like breaking shit. The rest of this is not that bad of a job. Takes a little bit of time. It'll take you a couple hours if you ain't never really worked on anything before. Knowing what I know now, about an hour, maybe hour and 20 minutes per side. The top part, again, don't forget to tighten those back up once you're done, but whatever. Now on the AutoZone one, there is, and this is a kind of a pain in the ass. It's kind of hard to see here, but there is a little hex in there for putting the steering knuckle. The problem is you got to get the steering knuckle in, and you got to get the axle in there. Well, I didn't have an Allen that was the correct size. I did happen to have something that held it in place. You could probably get by with needle nose pliers. This was the trick that I ended up using on the driver's side. I haven't done it on the passenger side. I happen to have a specialty a specialty thing here. This is for it's like a little hex with a little hole knocked in it or punched in it, and I use that because there's very little clearance, because your drive shaft or your axle shaft is going to be right here. You can't put a regular Allen unless you cut it off into like a really short dog leg, and then you could probably get it in there. Not too sure the size, but just guessing, I'm going to say 6mm. This worked right here without a problem, and then the new nut just went right on with no problems. So if you don't have that thing held in place, it did spin on me and would not stay, it would not tighten up in the bore. So whatever. That's about it. New one came with the grease fitting, so these got to be greased after you're done. It's helpful. Also, I think it's a good idea to grease these. I did not, but I think you really should. It'll also make it a lot easier to do alignment. But whatever. 11 minutes into this shit, and I haven't actually even showed you guys how to do anything. But if you can't figure most of this out, you shouldn't be working on cars. This was a 21mm. I just zipped it off and then whacked the knuckle like 3 times and it popped loose. Came apart really, really freaking easy. So, once again, peace out, bitches. Oh, by the way, check that out. I'm buying that. $500. Runs and drives. As you can see, it's pissed itself because there's a oil leak. But whatever. I'm actually trading a Shinola watch for that. He's going to give me that plus cash for the watch. So, good to be me sometimes.